we were sitting in the offices of the preeminent investors of Silicon Valley, the guys that picked YouTube and picked PayPal and picked Facebook and picked, all the apps that we use today, staring us in the face saying, this will never work. And I remember thinking in those times when we drive back to our apartment, our tail between our legs, thinking like, another rejection. I remember thinking, they don't know.
3, 2, 1. Our next entrepreneur is a pretty famous guy because he did something that's the American dream as well. And the American dream is start from nothing and create your world, create it the way you want by doing something for people all over the world, all over the country, wherever you serve. Add more what? Do more for others than anybody else does. But sometimes the value is sitting around us, we just don't see it. You saw the example here with C3 as an example. So our next entrepreneur is famous because he couldn't pay his rent, and the solution to be able to figure out how to pay his rent turned to a company called Airbnb. A company that now they're in over 100,000 cities, 220 countries. I mean, the UN only recognizes 196 countries, so I don't know which other countries they're in, but they're there. It's just truly, and they're one of the top 50 most innovative companies in the world. They've been described in every way, and Joe and his two partners made it all happen. Give it up for our friend Joe Gebbia, ladies and gentlemen, give it up. We had you here 6 years, I can't believe it's been 6 years, 6 years ago, 2017. And your business was about a $30 billion business. Now it's an $85 billion business, Airbnb. 85 billion, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, it's twice the size of Hilton in terms of valuation. You don't own any places. It's truly an amazing invention. But let's go back, and I know you're doing Samara now. I know you're on the board of Airbnb, and we're going to talk about your new project. But take us back to 2007 and the real origin of this, because the origin stories are what inspire people. It's the American dream. And you got a letter from, I think, from the person that owned your apartment building. Yes. What did that letter say? What did it trigger?
So I always had this dream since I was in high school. During the first .com, I'd read all these stories of these companies starting in this mythical place called Silicon Valley. And I thought, man, one day I would love to be a part of that. I had no idea where Silicon Valley even was on a map. You couldn't even tell me where to put my finger. But it just seemed like all roads of entrepreneurship were in this place. And so I learned coding, I learned how to make websites over the years, went to design school. And the first chance I had, I packed my life into my car and moved across the country to San Francisco.
Wow. How old were you?
I was 25 when that happened. Okay. And so...
And where are you moving from? I don't remember.
I was in Providence, Rhode Island, studying at the Rhode Island School of Design.
Okay.
Graduated, then went to the West Coast to follow my dream.
Yeah.
And man, I got there and it was such an exciting time. People were starting companies. The internet was back. It was 2006. And I started calling one of my classmates from college, a guy named Brian Chesky, another entrepreneur that he ran the hockey team. I ran the basketball team. We were the two entrepreneurs on campus. I said, Brian, you got to come to San Francisco. We're going to think of a big idea together. And he said, oh, yeah, maybe. About a year of recruiting him, he finally moves to the city. I quit my job at the time, he quits his job, and here we are, two 26-year-old entrepreneurs with no idea what the hell we're working on. But all of the enthusiasm and passion to make something happen. And that's when they say that the mother of invention is necessity. And let's just say the mother came knocking. And it was in the form of this letter from our landlord. And I'll never forget, I'm at the mailbox, I open up the letter, and it says, Dear Joe, your rent is now 25% higher. My heart sinks in my stomach. I run to Brian and said, Brian, we have a math problem here. I go to my Bank of America online banking account, and sure enough, I didn't have enough money to pay rent that month. We were going to get evicted. We were going to lose our apartment. And that's when the gears began to turn. We started coming up with ideas. All right, how do we make money quick? And it turned out a design conference was coming to San Francisco that was so big, the hotels had sold out. And I remember being in the living room on the laptop, looking at this website, red letters, sold out, and thinking, we have so much space in our living room. I have an airbed from when I hosted friends in college. What if we blew up the airbed on the floor? We'll cook breakfast in the morning, pick guests up from the airport, give them a subway pass, and by that night, the concept wasn't a bed and breakfast, it was an airbed and breakfast.
That's the man for that. How incredible is that, huh? And so what did you do? Where did you advertise? What did you do?
Well, that's the next problem. We bought the domain airbedandbreakfast.com. I don't remember, I don't advise find an 18-character URL. So we made the website. It was like 5 pages. We made it in a couple of days. And we had this next problem. How do people find out about our website? Well, we emailed the conference, said, hey, you guys have a problem. We have a solution. We've got now 3 airbeds in our apartment. We're expanding quickly here at Airbed and Breakfast. We did call some of our other friends in San Francisco and say, hey, would you guys do this crazy idea? And of course, everyone's like, sure, I'm going to the conference too. I'm a designer. Let's meet people. And so I think we had like 10 airbeds, couches and the such. And the conference emailed 5,000 attendees and say, hey, if you still need a place to stay with Joe and Brian in their San Francisco loft. And when they did that, all the design blogs picked it up. And so within a matter of like about a week, we went from like the idea to international design blogs covering this, and we started getting emails from everybody. Like people trying to convince us why they should be one of the 3 lucky guests on an airbed. And so, I mean, they were sending us resumes, LinkedIn profiles. I had a guy find my phone number on the internet and leave this like 3-minute voicemail, who actually became our first guest. His name is Amol. He's amazing. And these guests arrived.
That's cool to know who your first guest was still. That's beautiful.
Oh, Kat, Amol, and Michael, the first 3 people that stayed in our apartment. We're still friends to this day.
That's very cool. That's awesome.
Oh. Wow. When you share your home with somebody, it's a different kind of experience. You get to know them. You know, we cooked breakfast in the morning. We held parties at our house that during the conference, they met all of our friends.
By the way, notice he turned into an experience. Right, you picked them up at the airport, got them to understand what's going on, showed them around. It was very different than just come lie in a bed, right? Otherwise, it wouldn't have been as powerful.
Exactly, and that's an early lesson that's still true today. Always think about the experience. I mean, you guys were just talking about this, how important it is to design the experience. From day one, it was more than just a place to rest your head. It was everything.
How did you, so people hear that and then people think, oh, this thing happened and then you got on Oprah and now everybody, you became a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Didn't quite work that way, did it?
No, I think, it couldn't be further from the truth that you just, you wake up one day, have an idea and it just takes off. I think YouTube is maybe one of the only stories where it actually just did take off.
Yeah.
And they call, hockey stick growth. We've all heard of that before. Yeah. YouTube had what they call stripper pole growth. But that's very much the exception. For everybody else, it's really hard to get what I call product market fit. You've got an idea and a product. How do you connect it to the market in a meaningful way that they want to pay you for it?
Yes.
And so that took a long time. Man, it was painful. Whether it was investors rejecting us and saying, this is the creepiest, weirdest idea I've ever heard. Well, we actually had people in Silicon Valley walk out of the room on us.
Really?
Yes, I will never forget it. And they're probably getting less investments now as a result. Because I definitely don't send anybody that way.
Imagine you walked out on Airbnb and it's worth $85 billion today. You thought it was a dumb idea.
Look, there's multiple rejection emails on the internet you can look up of really smart people who they couldn't quite make the leap to understand, well, how is this going to work at scale?
Yes.
How are you going to get a meaningful amount of people to stay in the home of a stranger? Which is crazy. It makes kind of sense. We've all been taught the bias of stranger danger since we were kids. And so our whole business model is based on this assumption that you're going to get strangers over the internet to stay in people's homes. So
let's talk about that, because that is bigger than the economic barrier. That would be the biggest barrier. And you found a way to design around it. Share with people how you did that.
Wow.
Think about that. How important is trust and safety, right? Especially in this context.
There's a whole talk just about that. I'll pick out one thing, which was in the early days, we recognized in our biggest market, New York City, we had 30 hosts at the time. This is 2009. And we're going through the listings. And we noticed something, a pattern actually, that people generally didn't have very good pictures of their homes. It was taken at night, or there's dishes in the sink, or, you looked at it and you're like, I don't know if I'd want to stay there. And so, thankfully I've taken plenty of photography classes, at RISD and before. And so Brian and I look at each other and we go, what if we just go solve this problem? Why don't we fly to New York, leave our office, which was our living room, and let's just go take pictures for people. So we had no budget at this time, right? We were like buying, the economy of the economy class tickets. We rented this camera in New York City. It was like the best camera at the time, wide angle lens. And we emailed the host and said, hey, we'd love to send a professional photographer to your place. Would you like free pictures? Of course, everybody said yes. So we get there, we knock on the door, introduce ourselves. Hey, I'm Joe Gebbia, co-founder of Airbnb. And they go, nice to meet you. Where's the photographer? And I go, that's also me too. And they go, what kind of website is this? So we come in and we start taking pictures, and I remember, I'll never forget, I'm showing hosts on the back of the camera, hey, what do you think of your living room, your bedroom, your kitchen? And they go, oh my God, my apartment looks amazing. Why don't you stay for tea or coffee? And so we'd sit on the couch, and Tony, the most amazing thing happened. These early hosts started to tell us all of the problems with our website. They started to tell us all of the issues that they were having as hosts that we never knew about.
Yes.
The kind of thing you would never get through an online survey, but the only thing that comes through in conversation, when you earn somebody's trust.
Yes.
And so one guy, I'll never forget, came out. He goes, oh, you want to hear how to make your website better? He brings back this spiral notebook with pages of ideas.
Oh my gosh.
I'm like, I'm taking notes. So Brian and I fly back to San Francisco. We tell our third co-founder, Nate, who's the computer science, the engineer, like, Nate, look at all this information we got. And he's like, guys, these problems are easy. I can fix them tonight. So we fixed their problems. We upload their photos. We emailed them, said, hey, it's great to meet you. Here's your pictures. What do you think about the new calendar setting that you gave us the idea for? These hosts fell in love with us. They're like, what website do you sign up for where the co-founders come to your apartment to meet you and listen to your problems and then fix them? And so the most interesting thing happened. Well, two interesting things happened. The first is that our revenue was a whopping $200 a week for months with no changes at all. I call it the Midwest of analytics. Perfectly flat and boring.
No offense to you, Ohio.
No, not at all. No, I love Midwest. And so suddenly, after we did this exercise of this crazy thing, taking pictures, fixing the website, revenue went from $200 to $400 in a week. Woo,
Let's hear it for that, ladies and gentlemen, for God's sakes.
I
doubled in a week.
I mean, I thought for certain there was a bug in the system. It was impossible. This was impossible. How did this happen? So we show our advisor at the time, and he looks at the numbers, he goes, what are you still doing here? Go back to New York City. And we're like, oh, okay. So we did the same thing, rinse and repeat the next weekend. Revenue doubled, $400 to $800. He didn't have to tell us what to do the next weekend. We went for 6 weeks straight, back and forth, coast to coast. Revenue doubled, and we almost have never looked back since that moment. The other crazy thing that happened is those 30 listings became 42, became 57, became 75, became 83. And we were doing no marketing, zero. We had no budget for SEM, or we had no PR firm. This is pure word of mouth.
Wow.
Because if you think about it, you go into work on Monday, and people say, how was your weekend? Well, let me tell you, the weirdest thing happened. These guys showed up with a camera, took pictures of my place. Oh, what's that about? Oh, it's called Airbnb. Oh, cool. Oh, you hosted some guests. And so people just started to talk about it. They actually started to describe our company with the word love. I love this company.
Wow.
I love these guys. And it was actually one of the best pieces of advice we ever got, which was, it's better to have 100 people who love your company than thousands of people that just kind of like it.
Yes.
And so in the early days, it's better to go deep and overinvest in your early adopters.
Create the raving fans.
And exactly, you're the pro at this. Create the raving fans.
Yeah.
And so that was us. We found the raving fans in New York, and it started to grow. Little did we know that it was actually the beginning of our network effect. Because New York's such an international destination, people came from all over the world. They could finally see a good picture of the home that they wanted to book.
Yeah.
And then they went back to Germany, Vietnam, Australia, and they became a host.
Wow. That's fascinating. Now, if I remember right, after your initial piece that you did there in San Francisco, which, by the way, San Francisco, proximity once again to where the action is, right? And deciding, he didn't know what. He decided, he didn't know how, rather, what. We want to find this big idea, right? Programming his mind, all things we talked about here. But right after that, you didn't really think, if I remember correctly, you didn't think that was your big idea.
We didn't.
How long did it take before what else did you do before you thought it was a big idea? And then after that, if you'll pick up on the next piece, which is everybody's thinking about, starting a small business, saying when they begin, where do I get my capital? And you had some unique ways along the lines of cereal that helped you to do that. So maybe you can share both those things. But let's start with it. You didn't just immediately go, this is it now after that. What happened?
So that weekend we hosted the 3 people on the airbeds. That was just a weekend experiment. Yeah. That was just a way to make the rent check for the following month. And so we actually, afterwards, we said goodbye to them and we moved on to something else. We tried to think of another big idea. And it wasn't until we went home for the holidays that was 2007. And everyone, of course, I went back to Atlanta, friends and family, hey, how's it going out there in San Francisco? What are you entrepreneuring? He said, well, not a lot. But we did have this weekend where we hosted these 3 guests. And I also, realized at the time there's a very thin line between entrepreneur and unemployed. It's just a frame of mind, really. But people had a very visceral reaction to this concept. They're like, you took 3 strangers into your home? And they either said, wow, I'd love to travel that way, or they said, you're crazy. And we came back from the holidays. Brian had a similar, experience. We thought, well, maybe that airbed thing, maybe that's something we should work more on. And we brought on Nate, our third co-founder. We rebuilt it. Nobody knows this. We've launched 4 different times in the early days, because when you launch and it doesn't work, who cares? You just keep launching. Nobody knows.
You didn't have that many people anyway. Just launch again.
You can just keep. We launched like 5 times between 2007 and 2009. You can just do that if it doesn't work.
How did you show them a little bit of the creative ways in which you raised capital when you went to, I believe it was Denver, if I remember right.
Yes. Well, so one of our many launches was for the Democratic National Convention in Denver, Colorado, 2008. This is the phenom Barack Obama, attracting the largest crowds that anyone had seen in decades. And so they move him from the Pepsi Arena, where the Nuggets play, to Invesco Stadium, where the Broncos play. So 120,000 to 80,000 people. And they had to now fill this stadium. And so there's this surge of people trying to stay in Denver for this event. And months in advance, the mayor was saying, housing crisis in Denver. We're going to open up the park so people can pitch tents. And we think, this is a good idea to relaunch. What if we relaunch and ride the coattails of all this press? And so we did exactly that. And we went from 0 to 800 homes in about a month.
Wow.
Just getting local press.
Wow.
Local press became regional press, became national press. It became an international story, this idea.
Newsjacking, ladies and gentlemen, newsjacking. Are you hearing?
I think we've done an amazing job of finding ways to be relevant with bigger stories going on in the world. Still true today if you look at the Barbie house that we just did last month.
You needed some cash, and if I remember correctly, didn't you take him Captain Crunch?
Well, so right before that, the numbers are going up, finally, right? 0 to 800 listings, people are actually booking, and we're like, oh my God, this is the rocket ship to the moon. It's happening. And so we tried to go raise money, and this is when all the investors rejected us because they couldn't get past the stranger danger bias. And so we decided, without any investment money, how would we come up with funds? Well, we did raise a round of funding. We call it the Visa round. And then the MasterCard round, and then the Amex round. And it always makes me anxious thinking back to these days because we maxed out credit cards without any path to paying them off. I would fall asleep at night and my heart would be racing. I was probably like a 150 beats per minute, just thinking like, oh my God, what are we doing? So we ended up taking out these credit cards, and then we had this other quirky idea, which was, if you remember back at this time, you have to think back. You had Barack Obama, John McCain, the biggest kind of, duel in the presidential races in a long time. And Barack Obama was commanding such an audience, and, his apparel was selling, and I remember, Brian and I were up late one night in the kitchen. At this point, we're just trying to keep our spirits up. It's pretty bad. Like, the website, we had just done the Democratic National Candidate. Everything came crashing back down, back to zero, back to the flat line.
Spike and then boom.
Yeah, they call it the wearing off of novelty. We didn't have product market fit. And so Nate actually moves back, to Boston. So the band's kind of falling apart, And so Brian and I, it's 2 a.m. Here we are in the kitchen, just joking around, just trying to keep our spirits high. And we go, we're called Air, Bed, and Breakfast. Wouldn't it be funny if we provided the breakfast part to our hosts to provide to their guests? Haha, yeah, what would we do? Well, I don't know, breakfast cereal. And we go, what if it was politically themed? What if we put Barack Obama on the front of a breakfast cereal? And we called it, I don't know, Obama O's. and we laughed, kind of like this, right? Haha. And then we said, well, we'd have to make a McCain one too. He was an officer in the Navy, so that's like Captain McCain's. And we had taglines. It was Obama O's, the breakfast of change. And it was Captain McCain's Maverick in every bite.
Right.
And so somehow this 2 a.m. kitchen conversation turned into boxes of cereal, which is a question like, how do you make breakfast cereal? So I called, the obvious answer, I called General Mills and Kellogg, tried to pitch somebody, they hung up on me. So I'm like, all right, well, maybe I'll call people in the Bay Area. They were nice enough to listen, and then they hung up. And then it dawned on me, you don't have to make cereal, it already exists in the grocery store. So I found a printer who we partnered with to print us boxes at no charge. We'd pay him a commission on every sale. And he goes, well, I'm only gonna make 500 for you guys of each box. And we go, 500, that's a limited edition. So we numbered each one on the top out of 500. It's now a collectible box of cereal. I found a caricature artist and photography, and we made obamaos.com. And we made product shots, put it on the website. We we mailed boxes to every reporter that we could get an address for, like Oprah's People had them, Ellen, Wall Street Journal, you name it, they have a box. And so imagine you're a journalist covering the election. A giant box shows up on your desk. You open it up and there's these 2 beautifully designed cereal boxes, Obama's and Cap McCain's. We got calls back from everybody. It was featured on CNN.com. They did a live interview with Brian and I in our living room talking about breakfast cereal. Not about our website, but it drove people to obamaos.com, and sales started to come in. So when a sale came in, again, we had no money, so we'd take the pre-order sale and then in the PayPal account, and then that night I'd go to the grocery store and I'd clear the O's off the shelf into like 2 or 3 giant shopping carts.
Whose cereal were you putting these boxes in?
Well, we'd bring these boxes of like Cheerios back to our house.
Cheerios for Obama and Captain Crunch for...
His was more of a high fiber square. Okay. Yeah. People always think I'm kidding when I say that.
That seems so appropriate.
So we'd come back and our whole kitchen turned into like an assembly line of cereal. And I'll never forget, like Brian and I, we have to unfold the boxes, and we had so many paper cuts, and then you had to have that, you take the bag out of one, you put it in the other box, and you hot glue it on the top, and you have to sit there and wait for it to dry. And we had so many burn marks and paper cuts, and I'll never forget this moment. Brian and I look at each other in the kitchen after like hundreds of boxes, and we're like, did Mark Zuckerberg ever have to do this? Like, are we completely insane? Like, and then we started selling more cereal than we were making sales on our website. And so then our parents were very confused. They said, are you guys a website or a cereal company? Honestly, I wasn't sure at the time. But we end up selling out of Obama O's. I forgot to mention, because it's limited edition, we were able to charge a premium of $40 a box of cereal.
Oh my God. And you bought them for how much?
A couple bucks. So we ended up selling out of Obama. So we made $20,000 in breakfast cereal.
That's incredible.
Which promptly paid off our credit cards and got us back to zero.
That's great. What kept you going during the times, like you talked about the 4 restarts of the site? What gave you confidence to keep going forward during that time? Most people, after 1 disappointment, they usually give up, 2, 3, certainly 4, but you just kept on going. What made you believe, or what made the 2 of you believe?
Gosh, it's such a good question, because you have to remember, we were sitting in the offices of the preeminent investors of Silicon Valley, the guys that picked YouTube and picked PayPal and picked Facebook and picked, all the apps that we use today, staring us in the face saying, this will never work. And I remember thinking in those times when we drive back to our apartment, our tail between our legs, thinking like, another rejection. I remember thinking, they don't know. They haven't hosted people in their home.
Yeah, they don't have the experience.
We have.
Yeah, they have a belief, you had an experience.
We had this firsthand experience. And it was so magical, Tony, to just share our home and our city with these 3 guests and make some money, of course, on top of that, that I thought, well, we just have to keep going until enough other people can experience what we did.
Yeah.
And there was a belief that there's enough other people in the world who want to travel like a local, who'd want to, monetize the extra space in their home to supplement their income, that we just have to keep going because they're out there.
Yeah.
It was a bit of an irrational belief. And in fact, I think, ask any great entrepreneur or successful company, like a lot of them started with an irrational belief, that was against conventional wisdom.
Yeah. I want to come back to trust and respect, because that's so huge in any business, but especially in the business you're trying to go against the grain of cultural conditioning worldwide. You talked about coming in and photographing the website and creating relationships. What else did you do so that people looking at that website could have more trust and feel that they'd be safe? And there had to be incidences as you got bigger, just based on volume, where people violated that trust and respect. What did you do to recover that or strengthen it still?
Well, we used what we knew best in the early days, which was design. And the way that I learned design was this. Some people think design is like, it's the label on this bottle. It's the logo, it's the graphic. Design, the way that I understand design and think about it, is it's the entire experience. So it's like thinking about, what are the brand values behind this water brand? What does it look like on the shelf of a store? What is the package experience? What does it feel like when you open it for the first time? Where does this bottle go when you're done with it? You actually think about a very holistic experience. And so, when it comes to the website, we were incredibly detailed about the website. Our website had to evoke trust. People had to look at it and think, I can trust my home or my vacation with this company.
Was there anything, 1 or 2 things you remember specifically you found that were either counterintuitive or they were intuitive, and you said that really makes a difference on the website? Yeah,
well, there were things that we did that no other website did at the time, which were profile, payments, and reviews.
Yes.
You had a profile about somebody. You knew who they were. You had a reputation from reviews from previous guests. And then you had
no one had really done that at the stage you did. No one had done that when you were doing Airbnb.
The standard at the time was Craigslist.
Wow.
Which is kind of like the Wild West. You're wiring money to somebody who has no history.
Yeah.
And so one thing that we did was we tried to show faces on the website as often as we could. Whether it was...
got to hit off that.
Yeah, kind of social proof.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, other people kind of like me are using this website too.
Yeah, that makes little sense. Tell me, you have, as you said, a passion for design. You have extraordinary. Now, you have 3 partners. You've been here before. We talk about everyone has different gifts, and we can all have all the gifts, but we're not all equal. Some are more artists. They're going to create and design and make sure that experience is amazing. Some are going to be more manager leaders that want to run the system of the business, and some are more entrepreneurial. We all have pieces of those where they can go in it for the risk and they don't care. They're ready to go. They'll sell the business and do another. All have different ways of looking at the business. What do you consider yourself to be at your core? Are you more the artist? Are you more the manager leader? Are you more the entrepreneur? And what were your partners, and how did that work? Did you guys supplement each other's gifts?
I learned a couple things prior to Airbnb. I had 2 ventures that no one has ever heard of because they completely flopped, but they were great lessons. And one of those was I was doing it by myself. And I remember thinking, man, next time I do a company, I'm going to find a co-founder. And so the next company, I found a co-founder. There was a problem, though. He was exactly like me. We were 2 of those archetypes you just mentioned. We were identical.
Yep.
And so then I thought, okay, the next company I do, I'm going to find people who are not like me.
Yes.
Who complement me, and we can fill out each other's strengths and weaknesses.
Yes.
And so I was curious, by show of hands, how many people are solo founders right now? Wow, that's a lot of people.
That's the majority.
Well, if you can, I recommend finding a co-founder. And I'm willing to bet there's another one in this room right now.
We talked about that earlier, didn't we, in the first part of the week?
Yeah.
Finding who are you, who do you need, right? And who do you need to let go of?
Yeah.
Combination is important to make it happen. How did that work with you and Brian? How did that, I'm curious, like where was the division of focus and energy and how did that work?
Yeah, so Brian is an amazing entrepreneur. He's incredible. He's the CEO of Airbnb. He's incredible at what he does. He's always pushing people to think bigger. He's always, what if you add a zero to that? He's very famous at adding zeros. And then Nate is the pragmatist. Nate is the software engineer. He's the guy that says, guys, yeah, great dreams, but what are we shipping today?
Yeah.
And so we always this balance of our head in the clouds, and with him, we had our feet on the ground.
Yeah, that's great. And then you're designing the experience. You all participated in that, but that was a huge part for you. Tell me when you began to get traction in Airbnb, everyone here has experienced government regulation now thanks to COVID. Anybody who never thought such a thing would occur, the business shut down and so forth. You had like ban Airbnb in some countries or some cities. The reaction from the hotel business, the reaction from some counties, some governments. How did you make it through that time? Because it would look pretty rough in some places.
It was challenging at times. What I've come to find over the years is that the more cities come to know us and understand our business, the more they come to see, oh, okay, this is actually a net positive for our city or for neighborhoods. The economic engine that we bring into markets, because we help complement Sam. We help distribute stays and tourism from outside city centers into neighborhoods. Yes. Where the local restaurant, the local cafe benefits from this influx of tourism. And then of course, we love paying hotel occupancy tax. And so cities love that too. And that's also,
Was that true in the beginning, or did that evolve?
I guess it only evolved to our capability to actually do it. And so in the early days, we had no, capabilities.
Yes.
But as soon as that we were able to grow and bring on those professionals.
Yeah. So a combination of the experience and their direct economic benefit, the two of them together.
Yeah, and I think we've remitted well over $1 billion of tourist occupancy taxes worldwide.
How many stays did I say? It was a billion. How many stays do you guys have?
A whole lot.
It's over 1 billion stays.
There's probably, I guess don't quote me on this, but there's probably upwards of 4 million people tonight staying in a home all over the world.
How cool is that? Wow, good for them. That's amazing, all over the earth. And the beautiful part of that is that the majority of them are having a personal experience, not just a hotel experience, right? They're getting someone who lives in the community, who cares about the community and cares about them. It's beautiful, the culture you've created. Tell me about any entrepreneur that's done well in the last 10, 15 years and went through 2008 and turned around and went through COVID. How did you guys, because I read somewhere, I don't know if it's accurate, I heard you guys lost 80% of your business in March of 2020 when COVID really shut down. Is that true? And how did you make it through COVID and turn around? And how did you rejuvenate and bounce back so rapidly?
80% would be a generous figure.
Whoa.
When was this? December 2019, we start the paperwork to file to go public.
Wow.
After all of these years of working our butts off, we're finally at this milestone, and we're working through January of 2020, February 2020, beginning of March 2020, and then March 12th or 13th happened, and it was like overnight, your business, our business, my business fell off a cliff.
Well, how big were you at that time?
I mean, the market cap was like 30 billion.
Yeah, that's what I thought, about $30 billion. So imagine 30 billion, you lose 80% of your business overnight. So
it was actually, so remember I told you in high school I watched the .com and got inspired.
Yeah.
As we all remember, there was another side of the .com when it crashed.
Yeah.
And I also witnessed and saw everyone's kind of companies, vaporize, just disappear overnight. And I always, in the back of my mind, I always thought, I want to make sure that never happens to me.
Yeah.
And so here I am in March 2020 watching
13 years in your journey.
13 years in the journey.
And you hadn't taken anything really out. I remember when you were here, I wanted to do an investment with you, and you didn't have the economics to do it yet. And he's got this giant company because he didn't have the liquidity. We talked about that before. You could have great wealth, but if you don't have the cash flow.
Exactly.
So you hadn't seen the real economic benefit on a sizable scale at this point. So 13 years into it, 80% drop from 30
drops.
billion.
We had to issue $1.5 billion or so of refunds in a matter of a couple of weeks. So a couple things happened. One is we didn't think it was right for guests to feel like they had to go on trips, so we allowed a global cancellation policy. Yeah. On the host side, we actually came up with, so we did a whole bunch of things. We came up with a $250 million support program for hosts.
Wow. Out
of our own company's pockets. We opened up Airbnb.org to help house frontline workers to be close to hospitals.
Yes.
So they didn't have to go back to the homes to be close to their family and potentially infect others.
That's awesome.
We took out $2 billion in loans.
Wow.
Because nobody had any idea how long this was going to last. And so we really had to fill up the coffers and just make sure that we were hunkered down for some time. And then on the employee side, we unfortunately had our first layoff. It was about 25% of our company. So over 1,000 people we had to let go. And we tried to think, what's the best way, what's the Airbnb way to go about this? And so we did, kind of the standard stuff, but we went above and beyond. We let people keep their laptops, the max health benefits you could possibly do, all that kind of stuff. And then we had an idea as we're thinking through this, which is the best thing you could probably do for somebody who's getting let go is help them find another job.
Yes.
And so we created what we call the Alumni directory. And if people opted into it, they could actually list on, I think it was airbnb.com/alumni. And we decided, well, this is going to get covered in the press, so we might as well make sure that this link gets in all the articles about this event. And sure enough, it did. And we had hundreds and thousands of visits to that web page in the days after the announcement, and many, many people actually got jobs because of it.
Wow. And when did you see the turn? Because I remember in our business, same thing. We had events booked, and then our business overnight, all over the world shut down. We lost $100 million, not $1 billion, $100 million in like 7 months, which at the time was the most I'd ever seen. And it's like, when is this going to turn? We kept thinking it's going to turn. So when did it finally turn for you?
Well, it turns out if you keep people cooped up in their house for too long with their kids, they have to go somewhere, even if it's around the corner. So we had more domestic stays in the summer of 2020 than we did in the summer of 2019.
Wow.
People were going on, day trips, the staycation kind of trip. And so we created a campaign called Go Near. And we started to also at this time see people's travel behaviors change.
Yes.
People were suddenly untethered from a commute. Their kids didn't have to go into a school. Hey, honey, where should we go? And suddenly people were booking 3, 4, 5, 6 month trips in a different state of the other side of the country.
Wow.
And so they were also booking in a more flexible way, which is like, just show me a couple weekends where I can go stay in a treehouse. And so we actually redid our entire interface around these categories and flexible travel.
Wow.
To adapt to this new pattern, this new way that people were traveling.
New pattern recognition, new utilization, new creation, right?
And so because of that response, the numbers finally started to tick back up ever so slowly. We continued the IPO paperwork and we went public in December of 2020.
Yes. Wow, give them hands. Amazing, amazing. 85 billion today, that's the story, instead of, it all came together. That's a piece that people understand. I love what you said in the video, talked about you got to get in the gym of entrepreneurship. Talk about what that means to you.
Well, I think the average person will hear about a company and say, oh wow, they just woke up and had that idea and it just took off. Yeah. And it just kills me when people think that, because it's like, no, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
Like you get in the gym and you work, you train, you're in the mindset. And for me, it's Airbnb happened because of those 2 other companies before it.
Yeah. Because
of the things I was doing even before those 2 companies.
Yes.
Always looking for opportunities, always saying, there's got to be a better way to do that. What would a better way be to do that? It'd be like this. And so it's just being, in shape.
Yeah.
So that ideas come to you eventually. You don't have to go looking for them.
Yeah. After 14 years and being part of this unbelievable journey, you're still on the board, but you decided to move on and create your own company, brand new company, Samara. Could you tell us a little bit about first of all, what made you decide to make that move? Because most people, if they're riding something that big, a rocket ship, they just stay. The fact that you had hunger to do more is one of the things I love about you personally. But yeah. What made you decide to make that shift? Because there are a lot of other people that oftentimes have a business, they don't know, do I really want to let go of it? And usually, an entrepreneur, if they sell their business, most entrepreneurs I know, if you're a real entrepreneur, it takes about 3 to 6 months and they're hungry to get back in the game. They're going crazy. They think they're going to retire and they don't. So tell me, what made you make that decision at that stage? And then tell us a little bit about your new company.
Sure. So it'd been 14 years. We got through the pandemic. We got through the IPO. The business had recovered. I looked around and our executive team was the best that we've ever had. And I thought, I think we're good. I think Brian's doing an amazing job as CEO. Nate's still involved as Chief Strategy Officer. And I was incubating an idea inside the company around an opportunity that I saw, which was hosts renting out homes in their backyard. And I didn't know anything about this, but I saw this sort of pattern. And then I saw in California, there was these headlines over the years, going back to 2015, 2016, of the government, the governor, changing laws to make it easy for people to get a backyard home, also called an additional dwelling unit or an ADU. For many reasons. One is to help with just add more housing to cities. It's a way to do horizontal density in different markets. It's a form factor that homeowners love because it's easy to install. Neighbors love it because it's kind of out of sight. So communities say, yeah, we have to add 300 more homes to our neighborhood. Let's not do a mid-rise, high-rise complex. Let's actually do ADUs, sprinkled throughout backyards. So there's incredible tailwinds. And so over the years, I've watched this and going, gosh, the options on the market just aren't that good. Most of them are actually made by general contractors, so they're one-off every time. And I thought, what if you were to take a product approach to this and actually think about this home as a product versus a construction project? So you could build it in a factory with the assembly line and economies of scale. And so over the years, we incubated inside Airbnb and then decided to spin it out last year. I brought on a co-founder who compliments me very well. His name is Mike McNamara. He was the CEO of Flex for 12 years, which is one of the largest contract manufacturers on the planet, a $25 billion company. And so he brings all the know-how of shipping, products, supply chain, manufacturing. I bring design, brand, work on the website and architecture. And so we spun it out last year. We launched in November. And it's a fascinating journey to go from software, which you can ship and change on the fly, to suddenly you're building 500 to 600 square foot home, which is it's quite large. And it's a whole different beast. But it's an incredible opportunity. It's the fastest growing part of housing in all of California right now.
Wow.
Permits for these jumped 17x since 2017.
Wow.
It's incredible. And there's no brand for it. This is the crazy part.
Wow.
There's no Nike for ADUs. There's no Airbnb for ADUs. And so that's what we're building with Samara.
And with your design, what do you put into that small square footage that makes it feel, because I know you must make it feel just, flow. It must make people feel good. What's your outcome? What's your thought process? And what have you done with that small space to make it feel good for someone?
It's really cool. It's a beautifully designed space. It's a small footprint, but it's a space you want to live in.
Yes.
And one of the things that I did early on in the project is I went and I stayed in really small homes on Airbnb.
Oh, interesting.
I went all over the country and just stayed in 300, 400, 500, 600 square foot homes. And I'm like, ooh, what makes this space feel too small? What makes this space feel comfortable? And so I had pages of notes of those things, and we've incorporated all those into the backyard product.
What are 2 or 3, just to give us a feel?
A simple one is light on 4 sides. So everywhere you go, there's windows, natural light coming in.
Yes.
High ceilings. Believe it or not, some of these places you go and you're kind of ducking in these tiny homes. So we have big vaulted ceilings and the gable ceilings in the middle, 10 foot plus, and it just keeps going. You go, It's a home that has soul.
That's beautiful. I like that, a home with soul. Is that your tagline?
It is now.
I was going to say, it's a nice one. I like it. Last question or two, and then we're going to go to the group for both of you. If we make a couple for you and then for the whole group. You have been incredibly giving and generous in your contributions to a variety of organizations. Not everybody who does very well financially does that. Some do it for positioning, as we all know, but you have a passion for it. I know you're doing it with kids, and I know you're doing that also. You've done it in a variety of areas, but tell us about Ocean Cleanup. Tell us a little bit about the Malala Fund, and why have you been involved in those things, and why is it important to you?
Look, I had parents who ingrained in me that you have to give back. And so I guess from an early age, I have to credit them with putting that idea in my head. And then I think ever since then, I feel like if you reach a level of success, it is, in my mind, it is a responsibility to give back.
Yes.
And so, I'm finding all kinds of interesting ways to do that. One is called the Ocean Cleanup Project, which I came across this guy named Boyan Slat, who in high school went on a trip to Greece, and he's snorkeling around, and he comes back to shore, and he has a conclusion. He saw more pieces of plastic than fish.
Wow.
And he thought, who's doing something about this? He looked around, and nobody was doing something about that. And so he created the Ocean Cleanup Project. And here they are, 12 years later, at least, and they've come up with a systematic, scalable way to do two things. One is to clean up what are called the Great Garbage Ocean Patches, which are these 4 or 5 patches of trash in the ocean. It's
like
about
islands.
twice the size of Texas, where these gyres come together, and so it all just kind of forms there. And while it's sitting there, by the way, it's just breaking down in the sun and the waves, turning into microplastics that fish eat. Yep. And then we go fish the fish, we put it on a dinner table, and then we eat that. And the average person eats about a credit card's worth of plastic a week.
A week? Oh my!
It's crazy.
Wow.
It's crazy. And so they're doing an amazing job of cleaning those up. And then the second thing is they said, well, how do we stop it from getting there in the first place? Well, they used a very software-driven way to figure out, of all the rivers in the world, which are the most harmful to putting trash into the ocean. And so they've identified those rivers, and they came up with this amazing device called the interceptor that sits at the mouths of these rivers and filters out plastic before it gets into the ocean.
Wow, that's fantastic. One last one related to this. Tell us about the role that Airbnb has created in dealing with things like the war in Ukraine. This is really beautiful what you guys have done.
Well, you may have seen in the video, Airbnb.org started during Hurricane Sandy. Since then, we've housed 300,000 people during natural disasters, wildfires, floods, earthquakes, typhoons. And over the years, we started to think, well, our hosts are so generous. They're offering their home usually for free, sometimes at a discount. What are some other problems in the world where people need shelter? And with all of the displacement going on right now, whether that was Afghanistan in 2021, whether that was the 6 or 7 million people that fled Ukraine last year, we activated the platform, and our hosts responded.
Yes.
Unbelievably so. They hosted 100,000 Ukraine refugees.
Wow.
Throughout all parts of Europe.
Wow, let's have a hand for that. That's awesome.
And
Joe Gebbia, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, yes. Let's do just a quick couple of questions for the two of them, since they have them together here. And it wasn't really originally designed. You both kind of in the hospitality business and a little more than that. Yes, right here. Give her a hand.
Hi, I'm Jenny. I'm from Savannah. I started my first Airbnb in 2014, and I've been a super host almost every quarter
Congratulations.
since starting.
Great.
I have 22 properties on Airbnb right now, and
Wow.
I wouldn't be here today without Airbnb, so thank you.
thank you.
Wonderful. Give her a hand. That's beautiful.
So my question is, for you about like the travel forecasting and trending. We had like what we called revenge travel during 2020, 2021, where it was just overwhelming how many bookings we had. And now we're starting to see 2019 numbers again. What are you forecasting, and how will Airbnb pivot with the numbers dropping for the stays?
I wish I could give you forecasts. I can't do that, but I can tell you what our results were in the last quarter, which is we had another record number of bookings. So, look, I think like every business is probably normalizing back to pre-pandemic levels. Doesn't matter if you're e-commerce or travel or whatever industry. So, I think travel is one of these evergreen industries. Even in a down economy, even when we launched in 2008 and went through the Great Recession, people still traveled. They were just looking for a way to save money in that case. And so I'm sure you provide a great way for them to do that.
And I just had another question too about your ADUs. What's the price point for those, and how long are they taking to ship?
Great question. So price point is on our website, samara.com. You can check that out. And he starts at about $289,000. And one of the big unlocks for us was we realized people don't want to take on a construction project. The average homeowner is not an expert at construction, so we take all of that on. So our price is all-inclusive for everything. All the customer has to do is customize it, and we literally handle everything from that. The permits, the soil samples, the utility hookups, all the kind of hard stuff. And then your second question was?
Oh, just how long are they taking to ship?
Oh, yeah. So we're at about 5 to 6 months.
Okay, awesome. I'm definitely going to order one.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Give her a hand. Thank you very much. How about back here? Yes, sir. In the gray sweater. Good, but give it up for him.
Hey, Joe. I used to be a super host, and I wanted to thank you. I really resonated with what you said about the thin line between an entrepreneur and unemployed. Being a host actually made it possible for me to follow my passion as an entrepreneur. So thank you for that first.
That's very nice.
Second thank you is I've been a huge fan of this 7-star experience principle of Airbnb, so much so that we've made it a principle at Dollar Donation Club, which is my company. We use it to improve the experience of giving to the world's most effective charitable causes. So I was wondering if you could share some nuggets of how you develop that principle, how you use it, because I've always wanted to ask you about it. It's been such a great way to open the ceiling of what's possible with a product experience.
And most people here are not super hosts, they wouldn't know what it is. So if you'll share of the 7-star principle, that'd be great.
Well, I remember in the early days, going back to August 2008, when we were trying to build the site and launch it for the Democratic National Convention, we had this idea of, what if we took $1 from every reservation and it went into some kind of housing fund of some kind, some national homeless fund or something like that. And then we stack ranked all the things that we had to get done in order to launch our company, and it was unfortunately at the bottom. But that idea never went away. Even though we didn't implement it, it showed up 10 plus years later in the form of Airbnb.org as a way to use our company to go beyond the call of everyday business, to find ways to give back and utilize our superpower as a company. The fact that we have hosts in every country on the planet. We've got this internet platform that can respond in real time to events. And we can activate and cultivate this amazing generosity from people all over the world. And so I look back and I used to regret, I'm like, oh man, we never did that dollar reservation idea. But we couldn't. We had to build a valuable company first that then allowed us to go do these other things at scale.
Very nice. Great. Couple more. Yes, sir. Give him a hand.
Thank you. I got a question for Joe. My question is, it's around being an entrepreneur. So I started a tech company last January, and I also raised some funding from the Bank of Visa. And at one point, I was down to $38 to my name and $100,000 in debt. And then thanks in large part to a lot of the material I've absorbed through the Tony Robbins community over the last 7 years, we went from $0 a month in revenue back in January to $28,000 a month. That's about what we're averaging, and we're flirting with being cash flow positive. So my question is this: you also at one point, things started to work and you got maybe a little too big for your britches, and we're in that teenager stage, as they talked about earlier this week, and you wanted to be a young adult in business. My question is, if you could give advice to yourself back then, what are 3 things that you wish you would have known then that you know now that would have made a big difference?
Oh man, to give my teenage version of myself and my company advice. Well, actually, it's going to be a piece of advice that contradicts itself immediately with the second piece of advice, which is patience. I look back and I'm like, man, I was so anxious and so like, I wanted it right now. And I look back and I'm like, it just took time. Like, it's okay. But the other thing I would go back and give myself advice is like, you have to be urgent. Like, you have to go now. Like, you can't wait around. And so, I think between just tell myself to chill out a little bit, like,
Be patiently compelled.
Yes, thank you.
You don't lose that compulsion to move forward, but you still have to have the balance in there.
Yeah. Another thing that I would do, and we kind of did do this, so this is more maybe a recommendation from a learning that I had, which is on the topic of company culture. And as Sam shared some great insights earlier about that, company culture will emerge. And you can either design it or just let it happen. Something will be there. And so we had this idea that early on, like we would design it. We'd be very methodical about it. And we'd be very instructive about what do we actually want our company culture to be rather than just let it emerge organically.
Sam, how did you look at that in the beginning for you?
Well, I think the biggest thing I'd go back and say is, number one, know your business better, meaning know your competitors better, and always have a philosophy of scale. I mean, I think what Joe and Brian did so well, I actually use them as examples for people that I speak to in my businesses, it wasn't a no-brainer. Now it's a no-brainer, right? You think about Airbnb, right? All makes sense. But imagine when they were pitching it. I saw actually a lot of interviews you and Brian did about, the people like, you guys are crazy. I mean, it was all the people that said it couldn't work. Yeah. And I think that you're going to get a lot of that, right? No matter what business you're in. But I think, but having the confidence, but also knowing what your competition's doing, knowing what, literally ring fencing the thing that really differentiates you the most and ultimately gets you to scale. Because the fact that Airbnb worked, not only as a guy who was competing against them in the hotel world, now mind you, they didn't disrupt me as much as they did the Marriotts and the Hiltons and the people that had a lot more scale. I didn't have the scale. I mean, they quickly got to scale globally. But the thing that we shared in common was the experience and the dedication to the consumer and the innovation. Yes. They did it digitally and really with the host program. We obviously did it more brick and mortar, which is a lot less scalable. But I mean, what they have done in such an impactful period of time and created a new language in hospitality, real estate. I mean, there's people that call me now, they go, I'm building a brand new building, it's gonna be all Airbnb. I mean, they have become Marriott, Hilton, I mean, combined. I mean, it's a concept that you got, and their commitment back to their customers, their commitment back to their employees, their commitment back to their communities is world class. So it's proud to be on stage with both of you guys, but it really is something very special. So that's what I would hope to be one day.
Thank you.
What would you say, gentlemen, what would you say is the biggest mistake that you see young entrepreneurs, when I say young, not necessarily young in age, but whatever stage they do it, early stage entrepreneurs make, and what could they do differently in your mind?
I would say that it's entrepreneurs who, here's my advice to early stage entrepreneurs, is chase a problem, not a technology or a trend. Chase a problem that you are intrinsically tied to. The closer you are to the problem, you should be married to the problem. You're that close to it.
Yes.
That you understand it from the inside out. You understand the pain better than anybody, and you solve that problem for yourself. As Sam mentioned as well, solve your own problem, build something for yourself.
Exactly.
It's exactly what we did, and if you look at some of the best companies that are out there, they started that way.
Yes. How about for you, Sam? What would you say?
Well, I think, to me, the biggest thing has been really be passionate about the solution once you identify the problem, right? Yes. I think passion shows. Yes. I think, you hit it on the head. People get seduced by, if you look at tech, and listen, you guys are the masters of this, but the last 7 or 8 years, it was all about GMV and by revenue, and EBITDA was not even a question, right? So all of a sudden, there was all this capital markets, capital investment coming in, the SoftBanks of the world, these guys saying, we don't care how you get there, just get there. And when you really are looking at a product with passion, it has to translate to EBITDA, but also has to translate to the point where it's sustainable and you're really actually solving a solution. You're not just buying revenue. So as founders get really seduced by one day being Joe, right, and building that, they also have to understand that his product was actually profitable, and his product actually created a solution. So I think that's really what I would tell, and don't be afraid to ask questions and even look stupid. Put yourselves around an ecosystem of people that you want to emulate. It may not be able to work for Airbnb, but go find the 15 companies that work with Airbnb. Really understand how you can emulate whatever companies, the Teslas at Airbnb, these institutional companies that have really transformed our world, and be relevant around the rim, and never stop being curious. So that's, I think, the core that I would say from that side.
If there was someone who mentored you or gave you an insight that really helped you at the time during a challenging time in your business, what was What's one of the most important pieces of business advice someone ever gave you? One or two that stood out or really helped you turn things around? I'm curious if there's one that stands out for you, either of you.
I've got one on top of my head, which is a guy named Paul Graham, who started the incubator program.
Oh, yes.
That we got into, which it was in one of our first meetings with him, where he's looking at the numbers, he's looking at, our success, our 30 hosts in New York, and it's in that meeting where we see the bad photos of homes, and he goes, "What are you still doing here? Go meet your customers." And for us, that was an epiphany. Because up until this point, the magic of Silicon Valley is that you code your way through problems.
Right.
And so you're always behind a computer. You don't go into the real world.
Talk to
That's
humans.
crazy. You definitely don't talk to customers. That doesn't scale.
Yes.
And he gave us permission to do things that don't scale. And in the early days of a company, you have full permission to do that. In fact, you probably should be doing that.
Yes.
Because it will teach you. You will learn so much from talking to an early customer about what they love and what they don't love.
Yeah. Especially that binder you got from the one person showing your entire website. How about for you?
I think at a couple times there were different people that gave me a lot of unbelievable insight and foundational kind of, I'd say, advice. But there's a gentleman named Tom Barrick with Colony Capital, who very, very famous investor. And he came to me one day and said, "Listen, I love what you're doing. I'm not going to invest in your company yet, but once you make this a national brand, when SLS South Beach will open," he goes, "but in the meantime, just focus around what you can to really be relevant in these different worlds and ultimately drive a great relationship with your consumer, not too different, but make sure you're profitable. Because if you're not profitable, like we were talking about earlier, your runway only lasts so long. A lot of companies fizzle out right when they're getting there, and they can't really raise any more money. And we've seen that as well."
Yeah.
But so Tom Barrick with Colony Capital is now a big investor on his own.
I can build on that, which is a goal for a company, which we had in our early days, which is to become a certain type of profitable, which is called ramen profitable. Which is you're making just enough money to buy ramen and pay rent. And actually, if you can get to that stage, you have unlimited runway.
Yeah.
And you're not forced to take investment from anybody. And it gives you such freedom.
Exactly.
Yeah. I was just talking to a very famous person who changed his profession, and he's had all these people pushing $100 million towards him. And I asked him, the most important thing entrepreneurs know is, what do you really want? He's got all the people throwing money. It's a very famous brand. You'd know the brand if I told you in a heartbeat. And he said, "Well, I want freedom. I want this. I want that." I said, "Well, you're going to be training one master for the other. Why don't you just fund this thing yourself? Even if you do a little bit slower, take your time, figure what it is. You got the brand. You do whatever you want to do."
Yeah.
Last question for both of you. What do you enjoy most at this stage of your life, in business and in life? What gives you the greatest joy?
Very good.
Well, for me, I'm back at it again. We have Samara's a 20-person team. It's like we're back at the stage where nobody knows about our company. I'm sure this is probably the first time most people in this room have heard of it. But I love that challenge.
Yeah.
It's like, because Airbnb was there at one point too, and it's like to be able to take a brand and a product and transcend it, become a household name is like I'm ready to do it again.
That's awesome. And you had non-competes for a while. You're going all over the world again now, and you're doing your C3. But what gives you the most joy now?
Honestly, for me, it's we've sat. The thing with C3 is you're able to build a brand and then disseminate it into thousands of locations globally, in theory, very fast. So we're now giving platforms for not just the famous chefs, but the people that are about to break. We've actually signed up 7 to 10 great entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs, Latino entrepreneurs, people that have really sometimes don't have the same bandwidth or the same opportunities. And one of them is a great story here in Miami, has a small little cookie brand named Cindy Lou's. You may know it. Anyway, she's a rock star.
Love Cindy Lou.
So as an example, a single person who really passionate about her work, generally to get to 2 or 3 or 5. Now she's on the runway to be in 1,000 or 2,000 locations. So seeing somebody transform that and being able to do that, that's amazing. And then obviously what we're talking about, which is core to what we're doing as far as kind of helping people in the world of the estate by SB. So those are the 2 parts. And really just giving back. So we have a huge philanthropic division as well, which we celebrate as well. So
Well,
it's
both
fun
have
to be back.
So much in common, even though you're different. The things you have in common is you both are completely obsessed with over-delivering. You care so deeply about the people, and you've built experiences for people that they will never forget, and we're all very, very grateful to you. Please give it up for both.
Thank you so much.
Let them hear you, ladies and gentlemen. Joe and Sam, all the way around the world, let them hear you.